Hello everyone and welcome back to another Rivals video. I know we've had a lot of these back to back now, but with the new season right around the corner, I felt it only right I try my hand at pre-making the most likely hero to show up, Blade. Plus, alongside him, I want to throw into the mix two more monstrous heroes from the undead side of Marvel. Okay, real quick, while making this, it's been 100% confirmed Blade is showing up in the second half of this new season. So if I mention the fact that he's possible, that's why. For those of you who are new here, we don't talk about supposed leaks or actual in-game kits. Instead, we just make our own ideas for how some of our favourite characters should play, in our opinions, if they were ever added to the game. If you haven't already, feel free to check out some of our other videos on the channel, like our X-Men or our pre-making Ultron videos. Okay, let's dive right into this. There's tons of heroes to choose from in the Marvel Universe, and I had a hard time picking who, from the more gothic creatures, should enter the world of Rivals. Elsa Bloodstone, the Legion of Monsters, Lilith, the Howling Commandos, and Dracula himself all would make great choices. But before any of those, I think there's one hero with the presence and vanguard potential that just takes the cake. After an encounter with the SO2 serum and a severe car crash, Dr. Theodore Salas became the ManThing, a monstrous creature of the bog that protects the nexus of all realities, a plane between space and universes, interconnecting Ted with not only every location in his world, but also the vast multiverse. Over the years, he's faced off against monsters, demons, spellcasters, and even gods, all in the hopes of defending the Nexus and the life he finds around him. He's even been an active member of different teams like the Thunderbolts, the Howling Commandos, and the Legion of Monsters. As for his powers, well, he can control plants, regenerate from complete destruction using plants and swamp life as a material to grow from. He can produce deadly toxins and acids. He has telepathic empathy that allows him to feel the true feelings and nature of other creatures. And of course, thanks to his connection to the Nexus, he can teleport and open portals. So I think with all that we can safely say Ted should be a vanguard, and one I want to centre around a terrain mechanic. Kind of like how Penny has her nests, I want ManThing to have some sort of swamp ground or flower bed he can summon and interact with. That being said, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a look at his primary fire first. This is Acidic Swipe, and it's your basic run-of-the-mill melee attack. With a somewhat decent range, ManThing swings his claws out in front of himself, but this comes with a unique property. The attack is acidic. This means that a few seconds after being hit by this attack, the target takes a second chunk of delayed damage. But what makes this special is that the timer for this damage resets every time the target is hit by the attack, and then that secondary damage increases. So if you land 4 hits, 3 seconds after the 4th hit, if it was a 3-second delay, they would take 4 stacks of the acidic damage. This means that you've got to decide when to drop a target and rely on the acid to help you, or when to keep pursuing them. A great maneuver for dealing with dive heroes trying to flee from your attacks. Now, as for the cooldowns, well, this is where we get back to that flower bed idea I had before. This is Herbaceous Border, and it allows ManThing to summon a swampy flower bed where he is standing. He can have up to 2 of these on the map, and attempting to summon a third would just remove the oldest one currently still around. Also, destroying the floor it's placed on, if it's on a destructible floor, will of course remove it. Other than that, however, these can't be destroyed, kinda like Penny's webs. But what do they do? Well, if an enemy is KO'd near one of these, then ManThing gains overheal based on that KO'd character's maximum health. Also, if ManThing is stood on a herbaceous border, then the ability instead becomes Spore Mind. These two obviously would share an imp, as I just said, but they'll also share a cooldown so that you can't summon a border and then immediately use Spore Mind, or vice versa. Spore Mind has ManThing teleport from the border he's stood on to his other border if he has one active. If there are no other borders, then instead it teleports him back to his spawn room, getting you away from the fight you're in. So this kind of requires setup, but can effectively become a mobility power for ManThing to get him either into or out of a fight. And then of course, ManThing has his second ability as well. Dark Blossom, which makes him burst spores from his body, creating a danger zone for enemies. This would then apply slowdown to any enemies within that area, just making it so it's harder for him to run away and easier to shoot them. Now, he does have one last cooldown in his pocket, but it is a passive ability. If ManThing is KO'd near a herbaceous border, then Perennial Life activates. This allows him to instantly respawn at the border that's nearest to him. Of course, given the nature of this passive, it would be quite powerful, so it definitely would have a cooldown whenever it activates, but generally speaking, this just keeps him in the fight and lets him mitigate more damage, and it makes sure his herbaceous borders are getting placed in strategic locations. So with this, ManThing can basically set up his borders and control a solid area, gaining health when enemies are vanquished, and being able to teleport to take angles or to retreat. The idea is to control and maintain ground, punishing opponents for pushing against you, and then taking them out as they try to retreat, using that acidic effect of his primary, and of course his spores to slow them down. Eventually, ManThing will build enough energy to call upon the Nexus of Reality. This is his ultimate ability and has him summon a very large radius of swampland, with the same properties of herbaceous border. In addition to all of that, all enemies within the swampland area are slowed. There is one other factor to this ult, of course. Since it's a gateway to the Nexus of Realities, it can call upon other universes. If another hero ults whilst inside this swampland, whether they are ally or enemy, the Nexus will summon a copy of them ulting. The copy will face the same direction ManThing is and appear in a random spot on the swampland. This basically means you can either time it to place on an ulting enemy, or better yet, team up with your allies to duplicate their powerful ults. Now, the amount of time the swampland lasts for decreases every time someone ults inside it. So whilst it is duplicating ults that happen in it, this is A, out of ManThing's control directly, and B, will speed up the end time of the ult, meaning you have to be really tactful about which ults you're trying to summon duplicates of. Okay, now there's one last thing to go over. Everyone's favourite part, the team-ups. First off, I had to lean into the plant motif just a little bit with Budding Kinship. This is a team-up with Gru, and it means that if our beloved tree man places a wall on one of ManThing's herbaceous borders, then that wall becomes a bog wall. Bog walls keep all of their original effects, but also emit dark blossom spores whenever they take damage. In return, ManThing can interact with any of Gru's walls, whether they're bog wall or not, using Spore Mind. When doing this, it will target the nearest herbaceous border as the recipient for the teleport, and if this is used specifically on a bog wall, it won't teleport you to the border beneath it, but to the other border, given it's there. And as for his second team up, well, that would be Swamp Rat, a special team up having ManThing as the anchor and letting Squirrel Girl gain a small bonus. Squirrel Girl's ult, Unstoppable Squirrel Tsunami, will teleport when colliding with a herbaceous border, as though it used Spore Mind. When doing this, the ult's length is slightly increased, so basically she can either sneak attack a room, teleporting the squirrels in, or she can set up a back and forth, almost endless chain of squirrels, given she is in a boxed off room with two borders there. This personally is one of my favourites, not only for the name, but also just for the concept of giving squirrels a way to sort of teleport around whenever they run into these borders. I think it's just really fun. So I'm pretty happy with how this man of a monster turned out. But that being said, I know why you're all really here. So let's not put it off any longer. Our next hero is a duelist and goes by many names. Eric Brooks, the Daywalker, the Slayer, and of course, Blade. Wait, this just in. Rivals has revealed the trailer for the new season during the making of this video, and it's possible by the time of upload, Blade could have his official kit already announced. That being said, none of what I come up here is a prediction, nor is it based on what NetEase have made. Just like the Ultron video, this is just another route to take the iconic hero. Also, damn, that animated trailer for season 3 looks awesome, and I cannot wait for this symbiote season to start. It's so cool. Blade is half human, half vampire, or as some of you may know, a dampire. This means he possesses many boons of being undead, such as regeneration, super strength, and fast reflexes, but without most of the drawbacks. Most notably, Blade can walk freely in daylight and lacks any phobias of garlic or wooden sticks. He does, however, maintain one of the worst weaknesses a vampire faces. Blade has to consume blood, and without it, he can enter a frenzy, that drives him mad and eventually kills him. Over the years, Blade has gone through a lot of changes. Initially lacking most of his vampiric powers and any guns or big dark leather jackets, Blade eventually drank from Dracula's blood and received a powerful bite from Morbius. Along with that, he's also underwent the most impactful of changes any comic book character can receive. He had a movie. Yeah, so after the Blade trilogy, Eric would change to match the Snipes interpretation a lot more. Of course, some of the movie tropes had entered the comic beforehand, but by the time we reach present day, the Daywalker has kind of become a meld of both gunslinging, clad in black badass and the classic Van Helsing style of vampire slayer. So that raises the question, do we have him focus on the gunslinging or the sword swinging? And how do we incorporate bloodlust into a fun mechanic? Right, let's take a look at what I came up with. Well, whilst I do think that Blade is a very gun-heavy hero, I ended up focusing his primary fire on the sword. I think the game could do with some more sword users, since out of the 4 that we already have, Swordmaster aka Iron Fist never uses his, and Magneto's is limited to a melee that rarely comes up. So it would be nice for Blade to really actually focus in on his namesake. So this is Slice and Dice. I almost called it hack and slash after the Monster Hunter comic, or just slasher, since, you know, slasher horror and all of that. But I think Slice and Dice is just a little bit better and a little bit more Blade. It quite literally has him slashing Dracula's sword as a powerful melee combo. There's not a lot more to it. Along with that, he does have an alternate fire, although it would have a cooldown. This is high stakes, and it allows Blade to equip a mighty crossbow, loaded with a devastating wooden stake as its ammunition. It'd be high damage and decent range, but mostly here to just confirm a KO when it flees out of your sword's width. You might notice, however, it has a secondary effect reliant on his bloodlust. Bloodlust is a mechanic I have incorporated around Blade specifically. It represents his urge to feed on the living and how he tries to fight against it, but when it gets too much, he becomes far more savage. This passive is represented by a percentage meter. I really like the idea of a row of teeth with fangs around his reticle that slowly turns red, representing it increasing, but a simple set of numbers could work just as well. When Blade damages his enemies, his bloodlust builds. High bloodlust has its perks thanks to the savage nature it pulls out of him, like increasing Slice and Dice's range and damage, and unlocking unique effects for his other abilities in his kit. However, this effect has its downsides. When it gets too much for Blade to handle, it develops a couple of negative effects. These all kick in whenever bloodlust is roughly 80%, as always in these videos. The numbers are just placeholders, and I'll leave balancing to the real devs. Once it hits 80%, however, Slice and Dice and High Stakes both gain friendly fire, along with Blade suffering from a minor anti-heal effect that scales up as his bloodlust gets closer to 100%. Of course, you can lose bloodlust. Taking damage is the main way of lowering it. Every time Blade is hurt, he loses a little bit. In addition, if Blade is KO'd, then his bloodlust resets to 0% on respawn. This means that a skilled player has to be incredibly careful with their bloodlust, learning how to push their health to the max in a fight. Of course, if you're out of combat for a significant amount of time, your bloodlust will slowly lower itself as well, but this wouldn't be a reliable system. You'd mainly in a fight be relying on taking damage to lower it. Quickly back to High Stakes, if Blade has 80% bloodlust, then this move instead fires 3 stakes, arced apart from each other, giving the attack a bit of spread and the possibility of hitting more enemies, or even acting a little like Hawkeye's explosive arrows, and being used to get rid of terrain. When it comes to his vampiric powers, Blade also has a second passive ability, in the form of Blood Donor. This is because in the Marvel Universe, vampires can actively pass on any diseases, physical ailments, or the like that they are suffering with. When Blade is KO'd, any negative status he has is passed on to the person who KO'd him. This includes stuns, freezes, slowness, damage reduction, damage over time, and so on. If the ability has a time limit, then that time limit resets when it's passed on. Of course, his kit also has a couple of tools for getting around and hunting down the opposition. Firstly, Daywalker is a defensive maneuver. This transforms Blade into a mist and dashes him backwards. However, at 50% Bloodlust, it instead of transforming him, equips him with his iconic Uzi. Now ready for a gunfight, Blade dashes backwards, firing a wide spread of bullets. This effectively is his escape route from most conflicts, but it also means if he's been aggressive enough to reach 50% Bloodlust in the fight, then his way out is also an attack, turning it from a defensive maneuver to an aggressive retreat. And finally, to go side by side with Daywalker, we have Night Stalker. This is Blade's main movement power. I know his other cooldown is a mobility type move as well, but that just means Blade is a hero with a very versatile set of movements. Unlike Daywalker, however, Night Stalker is all about getting into the fight. This is effectively a far-reaching dash that, when colliding with a surface like a wall, has two additional effects. Firstly, it sticks Blade to that wall, just like Hulk's Leap does, but more importantly, it lets him chain an additional Night Stalker dash. This can be chained up to a max of 2 times, meaning 3 total dashes. And unlike the first dash, the second and third one damage any enemy's Blade moves through with a powerful sword swing, rewarding skilled players for setting up their dash chains. Effectively, this kit turns him into a real hunter, stalking prey, pursuing them with insane dash chains, and then slashing until he enters a vampiric frenzy. After that, he is open to continue his assault, fire off a barrage of stakes, or dash away in a hail of bullets. And if you effectively pick off your prey, then the blood hunt can begin. This is Blade's ultimate, and it transforms him into his monstrous form. Blade effectively locks his bloodlust to 100%, but does not suffer from any of the negative effects associated with it. In addition, Night Stalker now deals damage on the first dash. This means you can either drop all planning and just dash through enemies, or it means if you take the time to plan, then you could possibly land a Night Stalker slash 3 consecutive times to snag a fast-paced KO. Finally, Blood Hunt grants Blade the ability to apply bleeding with all of his attacks. What is bleeding? It's a new feature that means when applied to someone, they take continuous dots until they receive any amount of healing. So it's relatively easy to remove, but can be incredibly tedious and even game-changing in a lot of fights. And then eventually, when this ult comes to an end, Blade's Bloodlust is reset down to 0%. Honestly, I don't think this ult is too powerful or anything like that. I don't think it needs to be either though. I'm really happy with how this kit has turned out, and I think you guys will probably enjoy the team ups as well. Firstly, we have Dark Thoughts. This is available to Blade whenever Iron Fist is on his team, and it means that if Blade uses the team up ability button, then he enters a meditative stance that rapidly lowers his bloodlust. A great way to reset before a new hunt, opening new techniques and playstyles to get yourself ready without taking damage or spending loads of time out of the fight. And alongside this, he has Daemonic Sorcery. With Doctor Strange as the anchor, both Blade and Magic benefit here. Magic transforms her demon in Demon's Rage into a small vampire. This vampire, before making the normal series of slashes, takes a single large bite that applies bleeding to a nearby enemy. As for Blade, well, his Daywalker move now has an enchanted gun that also applies bleeding on use. Of course, you still need the bloodlust requirement to equip the gun in the first place, but it's just a nice overall buff when fleeing a fight to actually have on your side. Honestly, I've already described how I think this kit could fit into a playstyle, but one thing I really like about this is how open to reinterpretation it is. Imagine a player who instead uses Daywalker as a sneak attack to open a fight with, or one who farms bloodlust on tanks with large health bars, then takes those perks of being at 80% or higher and uses Night Stalker to dash into the backlines and then just delete a support. Tons of different ways to play this vampire, and I love it. But wait, there's more. I, of course, had one last hero I wanted to add here, and why not make them a strategist? So let's have a look at possibly the most obscure of our choices so far. The daughter of Marduk Kurios, aka Satan, aka the Devil. Satana Hellstrom is a powerful demon princess who has been a part of the occasional monster-themed storyline across Marvel's history, First appearing back in 1973, she has continued to make appearances to the present day, often bringing dark magic and demonic threats with her. Generally speaking, she is a witch and a spellcaster, much like Scarlet Witch or Doctor Strange, but also has a few unique powers thanks to her origins. She has the ability to create and control hellfire, to astral project, and even mind control. In fact, as a daughter of Satan himself, she even has access to the Penance Stare, the iconic move usually reserved for Ghost Rider. And her final ability, one I want to delve into most of all within her kit, is her Kiss of Death. You see, Satana can kiss someone and instantly kill them, and then turn their soul into a little butterfly that she feeds on. You see, as a succubus, souls are her way of sustenance, much like how vampires need to feed on blood. But enough of the history class, let's actually take a look at our final character. Satana is a strategist, but I want her to be an incredibly aggressive one, as in one that is rewarded for getting KOs and joining the fight. And so her kit revolves around Soul Food, a passive ability that means whenever she gets a KO, the enemy KO'd leaves a butterfly floating behind. This doesn't have to be a final blow from Satana, it just needs to count towards her KO number on the scoreboard. So if you shoot someone and then your Punisher takes them out, they still drop a butterfly. If she then walks over these butterflies, she absorbs them and gains 1 soul charge. Satana can have a max of, and spawns with, 4 charges. These charges are then spent on her cooldowns. Speaking of, the first one is Soul Fire, and this is a buff for an ally. When Satana uses Soulfire, that ally is ignited with blue flames. They then receive a minor damage buff and heal on any KOs they attain while the ability is active. Of course, her soul charges can be tactfully used elsewhere, like with Dark Deeds. This is possibly the most simple of her abilities, but it has Satana send a soul charge to instantly heal a targeted ally. Something I think visually could be really cool when using these 2 cooldowns is having her summon a glowing butterfly in her hand and then crushing it as the animation for the buffs themselves. Maybe the butterfly could be color coordinated with the ability used. I just think the idea of her summoning the soul butterfly and then actually destroying it is really fun. Satana does have one last move, and it's designed to save her in a scenario where she is a little overwhelmed, or just getting targeted by a particularly aggressive opponent. This is Kiss of Death. Satana grabs an enemy and performs a short animation in which she kisses them. This would kind of be like Emma Frost's Chokeslam. Once the animation is complete, that enemy will be linked. Linked enemies have a glowing symbol above their heads. When Satana is KO'd, the linked hero is also instantly KO'd. She can only be linked to one hero, and if that hero dies of either Kiss of Death or any other method, then the link is severed. This is, as I said, a last-ditch move to either have Satana avenge herself or to stop someone from focusing on her. I can also see some insanely funny moments where a Satana player Kiss of Death someone and then just runs off the map. Something I'd honestly find incredibly funny, and let's be honest, would have 1,000,001 edits online. Now, as I said, in order to get her soul charges, Satana needs to score KOs, and in order to do that, she needs a way to actually attack her foes. This is where Pin Prick comes into play. I think the visual of using a long pointed nail as a projectile is so intense and witchy and just cool. So that's exactly what this is. Tapping the attack button has Satana fire a powerful nail forwards as a hit scan dart, with high crit damage but also incredibly difficult to aim accuracy. And to go hand in hand with this, she has Pin Cushion. When she holds her fire button, she instead begins to charge up to 5 nails. As she charges up her nails, the damage increases. In addition, if charged to 5 nails, Pin Cushion will explode a moment after impact, damaging the target here and all nearby enemies. This means Satana would have a relatively high skill floor in terms of accuracy, but then potential to dominate in the battles with the likes of Hela and Hawkeye, whilst also gaining the bonus of providing healing and buffs for her teammate. the key downside being her lack of mobility once pressured, although Kiss of Death will sometimes work as a counter for those scenarios. Finally, when she has finished manipulating the souls around her to her whim, she will be ready to unleash her Penance Glare. This is in my opinion a fun take on the Penance Stare, having Satana glare forward at her foes, briefly, marking everyone within her vision. This doesn't instantly do anything, however marked enemies do take double damage for a set period of time, effectively boosting all your allies within the fight. In addition, this ult would reset all of Satana's soul charges, allowing her to either spend her charges to heal or to boost her allies, right before weakening her opponents. Generally, when a hero has such a mighty kit already, I don't think a game-busting ult is needed. This one enables her allies without being a healing circle and resets herself to continue her job on the battlefield effectively. And honestly, I think that's enough. And if you're upset about her having the Penance Stare when it's Ghost Rider's thing, then go check out our Ghost Rider video. We make 2 riders there, both with the power of penance. And now let's wrap this kit up with a lovely bow I like to call the team-ups. Devil's Bargain is a new passive that comes into play for both Hela and Satana when they work together. Hela's Nastroned Crowstorm, the thing that leaves explosive crows whenever she kills someone, leaves behind a soul butterfly after exploding for Satana to pick up. In return, Satana's soul butterflies explode when they're picked up, just like a Nastron Crowstorm, protecting Satana when she enters enemy territory to collect her souls. One little thing to keep in mind is, because this makes Hela's Nastrons drop butterflies every time, it means that if Hela and Satana work together to get a KO, it will only drop 1 butterfly, it won't drop 2. And of course I had to put in a Dante's Inferno reference in her team up with the Human Torch. This is Johnny's Inferno, and it's yet another passive. Now, allies stood inside the borders of Johnny's Pyro Prison, whenever Johnny has Soulfire applied to him, are also affected by Satana's Soulfire ability, effectively meaning his aggressive attack ability now spreads the bonus that she targets him with to the entire team, given they're in that area. Okay, so there we have it, a complete set of monstrous kits for the gothic side of Marvel. I'm so excited to see Blade come to Rivals, and I think the iconic Vampire Slayer is going to instantly become a fan favourite. But I'm also excited to see all of your ideas for how him and other monsters could play in the world of Rivals. I'm also intrigued to see what skins you guys want with Blade and the Symbiote season and the Phoenix Force. I've seen everyone talk about the Symbiote skins, the Phoenix 5, but personally, I want to see some of the Blade inspired skins. Give me Franken Castle. That's right, the Frankenstein version of Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. That's what I want. I want that skin. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments and I'll see you all in the next video.